is very interesting because some things have moved fairly quickly, literally fairly quickly. A lot of moving parts, literally a lot of moving parts in this situation. We're going to go down to Edenton. We're going to bring in our reporter, Alex Littlehales. We had just talked last week. I believe you filed a report last week about the Edenton Confederate statue, and there was a legal standoff about whether or not it would or would not be removed. Over the weekend, we got our answer.
Yeah.
And Alex, I will let you take it away. It was brought down on Sunday. How did we get there?
And where do you want to start? I mean, this is you know, this is a years long, and this is honestly, it may seem like it's the end. It's not. But this is another chapter in a story that is at this point been years in the telling, and although it appears that some may consider this to be, this is the closure of this story, it certainly isn't, just based on the information that I know and the reporting that we've done. I guess I can start with the most recent.
Let's start with the most recent news that just took place, and then we'll give the backdrop to how we got there.
So what you're seeing is a Confederate monument in Edenton. And so the most recent thing that happened last week is that in Superior Court in Chowan County, which is basically, it's called the Inner Banks, so it's a little bit more inland from the Outer Banks. There is a Confederate monument, you see it there, basically in the heart of the downtown area of this very quaint coastal town called Edenton. It's becoming a very popular day trip area because it has a very quaint downtown. It's right on the water.
In North Carolina.
Yeah, in North Carolina. And it's, starting to become a town that is making, it's appearing in a lot of magazines for, one of the best small town coastal areas in the South, right? That's sort of the brand that Edenton is projecting right now. But there's this monument there. It's a Confederate monument. It's been sitting there for roughly 50 years or so. And what happened last week was that a judge dismissed a case that essentially allowed for this Confederate monument to be removed from its location. I know that's a mouthful, but the best way I can explain it is that the town of Edenton several years ago tried to move this monument. They tried to relocate it to a different part of the town because there were people starting to protest the fact that this monument existed in the heart of the downtown area, right? There were several protesters that were showing up on a weekly basis on Saturday mornings, upset about the fact that, this town that's beginning to get a lot more attention has this, what they would call an eyesore to the town, right? A smudge on their community is sort of how they described it. And so there are these weekly protests. The town tries to move it. There's a coalition of people that want the monument to stay based on citing, history and preserving, veterans and honoring veterans. That is their argument. And so they filed an injunction, basically. They filed a restraining order. This is years ago again. So they filed a restraining order, and they got a judge to actually approve it because North Carolina has specific protections for historical monuments, including Confederate monuments. That's important to note. And the whole reason we did this story actually is because we were looking at the 10-year anniversary of North Carolina's monuments law, so again, that was passed in 2015. So essentially, several years ago, I know this is I promise there is an end to this very circuitous way of storytelling.
You got to set it up.
Yeah. There's just a lot, right? And so what happens is there's an injunction filed. So it basically stops the town from moving this monument for years, legally. These plaintiffs say you can't move the monument based on North Carolina's protection laws. Part of that is an argument that, if you do move any kind of historical monument or memorial, it needs to be moved to a place of, quote, greater or equal significance. So their argument is, well, if you move it away from the downtown area to just a random park, it's not going to have that same level of significance to the area, respectively. So successfully, this restraining order has essentially kept this monument locked in place for years. And there's been a lot of back and forth about what to do with this monument. The protests over the weekly protests only grew in size on both sides of the aisle. I mean, both pro monument people and anti-monument protesters. Those respective protests kind of grew in size, and it's basically just been this back and forth for years. And the original story that we did was, just looking at, 10 years after these monument laws were passed, people are still protesting them, but the towns are sort of locked legally that they can't do anything. And so I think also, not to be too long-winded, but the reason that we started talking about this is because this specific story started to gain national attention. So this was first reported. These weekly protests were from a national headline standpoint. The Wall Street Journal picked it up. We picked it up. The Washington Post picked this up. The New York Times included this battle in a story that they did about a neighboring Confederate monument in Terrell County, which we also profiled in this story. So it's been a years-long story, a saga in Edenton. And essentially what happened this weekend was judge lifted that restraining order. There's the picture right now. And essentially that monument was moved because there was nothing legally restricting the town from moving it and relocating it. So again, that's sort of where we're at now, but there's, so many layers to this.
And you kind of got the sense, Alex, after the judge's ruling, that decision, that something was going to happen quickly. You and I talked, maybe it was Friday, because the ruling came out on Thursday or Friday.
So the hearing for this was Monday. And the actual order that was signed was Wednesday.
Okay.
So to what you're saying, to what you're alluding to, on Monday, we are told and we know that essentially the plaintiffs who filed that initial restraining order, they asked the judge for a stay, which legally is basically saying, hey, don't do this yet.
Right.
Because what they were going to argue is that they were going to appeal this decision anyway. They knew that the restraining order was going to be lifted on this Confederate statue. Their argument was going to be, well, we're going to appeal it anyway. So we'd like for you to stay your opinion. We'd like for you to issue a stay, which it basically nullifies it, because the plaintiff's argument was that we do not want this monument moved if we're going to be appealing it anyway, because what if a judge then rules in our favor and says, well, these guys do have a point. We're gonna side with their appeal, and you can't move the monument. Well, the monument's moved. So there was basically chatter around town of whether the town was going to move the monument in time or before the appeal. And I told you that if I was a betting man, I would predict that it would happen Friday or Saturday.
You said that.
And it happened Saturday night. So
you absolutely said that. And so we actually received today a statement from the mayor, and I will go ahead and read it. I'll just read it because actually it's a fascinating read.
It is,
to be honest with you.
It's pretty much everything and more detailed in this statement.
So I'll read the statement, and you can get a sense of his response that we just got in to our newsroom this morning. This is from the mayor of Edenton, W. Hackney High. William Hackney High. So he starts off by saying, as we reflect on the Confederate monument debate here in Edenton, I am reminded of an old saying, quote, a good settlement leaves all parties somewhat dissatisfied. This speaks to the very nature of compromise. No one gets everything they want, but everyone gets something they can live with. This past week, a judge issued an order dismissing the lawsuit that included the 2023 restraining order prohibiting the town from relocating the Confederate monument. With that legal obstacle now removed, the town is moving forward in partnership with Chowan County to relocate that monument to its new home at the Veterans Memorial Park behind the Chowan County Courthouse. As a first step, the monument has been taken down and safely stored where it will remain until it is reinstalled at the park. He says this issue has been deeply emotional and challenging for the town council and many of our citizens. The volume and intensity of social media commentary underscore how strongly people feel on both sides. And Alex, you were alluding to that. You got protests from both sides that were building. He said, to those who feel the town acted too hastily, the record shows otherwise. He breaks down in August 2020, the town established the Human Relations Commission in response to concerns from local residents. The commission was tasked with studying the monument issue and making recommendations after nearly a year of thoughtful discussion, research, and community input. The commission recommended in August 2021 that the monument be relocated.
Do you have both pages, right?
I do.
I would say that the meat that you should get into, or
Yes.
the bulk of what is maybe down on the second page where it starts with rather. Do you see that? Rather than focusing on
Yes.
dissatisfaction. I
Yep.
think that's the crux of what people should understand.
All right, let's get to it.
Yeah.
Let's get to it.
Because a lot of it's kind of inside baseball, and we can, deliberate on a lot of it.
Yeah,
but
because he
that's-
speaks about, like, for those who thought that they were too slow. He's like, hey, listen, we didn't want to rush the decision. So we'll skip down to that, Alex. We'll say, so here he goes. He says, rather than focusing on dissatisfaction, I encourage all of us to find reasons for common ground. To those who advocated for the monument's relocation or removal, your efforts brought about meaningful change. The monument is no longer in its original, most prominent location at the foot of Broad Street, which is a very visible portion of Edenton. It is
it is at
the epicenter.
It is at the end when you do the walking tour of Edenton, when you are perusing all the cute shops, the cafes and stuff. When you get to the end of this street, the shopping district,
It's there.
It's right there.
So, Sarah, actually, let's see. I'm going to read the end of this. Can we pull up that live camera and we can show people who may not have a frame of reference what it looks like? Because Edenton actually does have a live camera that shows that area on their website. He says, to those who opposed its removal, your voices helped ensure the monument is preserved and relocated respectfully, not destroyed or discarded. Individual citizens are entitled to view this issue from their own personal perspective. Elected officials, however, must weigh all viewpoints and act in the best interest of the entire community. The decisions made by this council have been with that duty in mind, seeking to honor and respect all sides of this complex issue. So that was the mayor of Edenton, William Hackney High. And at any point, Alex, in your reporting and looking into this, did you get any indication from the mayor or other elected officials that they leaned one way or the other? Because the way that he writes this, he says, it's my duty not to base it on what I want, but to base it upon what we believe the people of the town want.
That is a great question. And in some of this reporting, we did reach out to city leader or town leadership on this, including the mayor, the town attorney. To be frank with you, there has not been a ton of reciprocated communication from town officials on this. I will give the benefit of the doubt in which that I genuinely believe that a lot of that is because they were actively walking a tightrope, legally speaking, and that they didn't want to say anything that tipped their hand either way. they didn't want to, and that is consistent through the reporting from the other, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. I mean, there were very sparse, grand comments about this issue. I think some of the local there was and we should also give credit. There is some great, fabulous local reporting down in that area. The Albemarle Observer, several kind of daily newspapers that have been covering this. All of the milestones in this story. I mean, we've kind of picked up the major ones, but the local papers down there. And it's not a huge area, so these are dedicated local newspaper journalists that are chronicling all of this. They have been able to, in sparing moments, get comments from city council, but because they're down there. Generally speaking, we have not had a ton of grandeur communication from town officials. At least I haven't. But that being said, now that this is at a different inflection point in the story, that could change. I've asked some of them to comment, to actually follow up on the mayor's comments in that statement. I'll see if they would like to meet at some point later this week. But I think it's just been a very challenging thing to navigate this legally. I have talked a little bit with the town attorney on this.
Okay.
But he hasn't spoken in a manner that is, this is how I feel about it. It's just been more of, hey, I'm just giving you kind of informational updates on it. We're still in the legal process of everything, so there's not much I can say, which I do get. I am curious if now that this is at a different point in the story, we get a little bit more response. And also, keep in mind, this is all happening when your little town or your very quaint, small community is being publicized on national newspaper outlets, right? So everything that they say, they know is going to be looked at with a microscope.
And let's talk about that, okay? So you have what's going on in Edenton, and there's a reason why they became this focal point of this conversation. They're not the only town or city that has or has had a Confederate monument. We got to think back to where things were in 2020, 2021, where we saw this push to really take down and remove and relocate these monuments. Sarah, you were talking about reporting here at 13 News Now when there was the major push in Richmond to get rid of the Confederate monuments that were there. And you spoke about that. I mean, that time, I'll let you speak to it, being here, because I wasn't here. You weren't here yet.
We were here, I think, right?
Were we at the time?
That was
What year was that?
post-2020.
Was it 2020?
It was the kind of joint summer of the Black Lives Matter protests. COVID was also happening.
Yes,
and then
for
there was
sure. But I could have swore that because it's Monument Row there in Richmond. I thought
Monument Avenue is the one in Richmond.
I thought that happened fairly early. Like, I think we were here, Alex, for the aftermath. I don't know if we were here for...
The last one I know I actually covered, ironically. The last one was the major one, was General Lee, the horse statue.
Yeah.
And that was the one that had been graffitied, had been a major point of contention in the city. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it came in waves, and then there was... Basically, the last standing one was the Lee statue.
Yeah, I believe that they removed 4. They removed 4 statues from Monument Avenue. And then, and here in Hampton Roads, we had a few that were removed as well. Downtown Norfolk had a monument that was removed. And in Virginia Beach, there was one that was removed. And then the Portsmouth one was pulled down by protesters. Yeah.
But what's different about that and why we're doing this story and why this is so relevant is because Virginia and North Carolina laws on this topic are different. I mean, that is why there are essentially very few remaining monuments in Virginia